Hello, everybody. Welcome into the NBA front office show. I want to say fall is in the air. Technically, it's not quite fall just yet, but it feels like it because NBA media days are being announced around the league. Teams are starting to say when they're going to be speaking to the media, when training camp is starting. We're less than 2 weeks away from actual basketball being played for preseason. It's here. It feels like the changing of the seasons is here. NBA basketball almost back. Let's go. Keith, I know you're a little under the weather, but I'm sorry. I can't hide my excitement.
No, man, I'm excited too. I've got one of those like late summer, let's call it early fall. Let's
Yeah,
just lean all the way into it. Early fall colds, and it's just kind of kicking my butt. But that's my own fault. I spent all night Friday night at homecoming in the rain with our daughter. She really wanted to go. It was her first ever homecoming game to go to. She watched exactly 0 minutes of it, so that was great too. But her school won, so we'll take that. But yeah, it was just one of those things. I should know better, but I didn't. But yeah, man, media days at the end of the week. We've got a handful of media days, and then we got preseason a week from Friday. I know I'm gonna get up a little early and watch at 6 in the morning. Is my plan here
Oh,
on the
you
East
are
Coast.
committing to that.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think so.
All
I
right.
think I'm gonna. I'm at least gonna tape it, and then I'll just tell everybody I was up, so no one will know the difference. But yeah, man, I can't wait. We're really there. Rosters are starting to take shape, and we're gonna get into some of that here on this. A couple more free agents off the board as well, and we're cranking along, man. We're almost there.
That's right. Okay, so I just looked it up because I thought this was correct, but September 22nd officially marks the start of fall. So we're almost there. We're
Close
close enough.
enough.
We're
Yeah.
close enough. We're
Well,
close
what is it they say? Good enough for government work, right? Good enough for us here on the front office show.
There you go. And there you go. It wasn't the saying close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades and seasons of the year, right? That's
Yeah,
how it
that's right.
goes.
And it doesn't count that much in horseshoes.
All
That's
right.
that. We're full on dads. Like
That's
that's
right.
total dad line right there. Yeah.
That's
Yep.
right.
Yeah.
That's
I
right.
realize I'm turning
Oh,
more and more into my father every day, and it's just brutal.
this has been the Keith and Trevor are getting old show.
Yeah.
Uh, let's let's talk about some NBA
Let's
transactions.
do it.
So Dennis Schroder finally finds a home, and it's with my Lakers, landing with LA, veteran minimum deal for 1 year. Keith, you and I talked about this a little bit last week about how there was an expanding market for for his services after he played well in Eurobasket. Maybe an overlooked part of this is that he was playing well in Eurobasket without an NBA contract. There's a lot of players that wouldn't take
Sure.
that risk, and so there was some admiration for him for the guts kind of go because like if he gets hurt, he's out of the league, right? He doesn't have a
Mhm.
contract. He's not getting paid for a year. But he went out over there, played well, and ultimately wound up back with the Lakers. And we can talk about the Lakers fit in just a minute. But what are your thoughts, just in general, on Schroeder now? Finally, end of September here, almost fall, finally getting an NBA contract.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy who is 100% deserves a spot in the league. I'm not the biggest Dennis Schroeder guy
Yeah.
around, but he is a good player who should be at the very least a good backup scoring guard on a pretty good team. And I think that's really what his role is going to be here for the Lakers. I think we're going to see him play quite a bit off their bench. Well, we'll see. Ultimately, I know people instantly jump to this means Westbrook is getting traded.
Mhm.
I don't think this is what that means at all. I don't think Schroeder being there changes anything with Westbrook. If he's going to get traded, he's going to get traded. If he's not, he's not. That situation is independent of this. But I think it was the Lakers saying, hey, for a veteran minimum, we can get a guy who is a steal on a vet minimum. Let's go. This is a guy he's going to give you what? Somewhere between 10 and 15 points per game off the bench, can start if you need him to, can kind of do his thing. There, I think handing him the reins and saying, go off the bench is the best thing for him.
Mhm.
I think that's the role he should play. He was better in that role with the Celtics last year than he was in the games where he had to start. But yeah, I have no issue with this signing at all. And this is, quite frankly, it's a little surprising it took this long to get there because I think he was pretty clearly the best free agent left on the board.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think for a Lakers team that frankly they need NBA talent. They need guys who are competent NBA players and
Yep.
that's what you're going to get out of Dennis Schroeder. Now, fit wise, I mean, now they've got Kendrick Nunn, Dennis Schroeder, Patrick Beverley, and Russell Westbrook all on the same team. Now, I've been trying to I've been watching Lakers fans trying to talk themselves into this working, which this is what we do this time of year, right? There's
Sure.
optimism reigns. This is the honeymoon period, and everybody's 0 for 0. I still look at this and I think, how are you going to make this work? The word is from a few different people, our friend Mark Stein, as well as Dan Wicke of the LA Times, that the Lakers see Russell Westbrook and Dennis Schroeder as point guards, that those two players will battle it out for the starting job, that Westbrook isn't even a lock to start. That's a whole other discussion, though. That two guards are Patrick Beverley and Kendrick Nunn, pushing Austin Reeves to the 3, and that Patrick Beverley is seen as more of a 3-and-D wing at this stage of his career than anything else. Now, that's me, Frankensteining together a few different reports there, but to me, that's madness and is going to create a massively undersized rotation. Outsider perspective, any chance this works for the Lakers?
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with the thought that Patrick Beverley is more of a 3-and-D wing. We think 3-and-D wing, 6'5" to 6'8", kind of your classic Danny Green type, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. Like those are the guys that we tend to kind of put in that role. But Beverley is very good defensively against anyone 1 through 3. As long as they're not super strong and you're going to back them into the goal, he's going to hold up. So that part I don't really worry too much about. He's never been a traditional point guard. He's not the kind of guy who's going to break down a team off the dribble. He's not going to run a ton of pick and rolls. He's always been better when he's paired with another high level or high usage ball handler, I guess is what better way to put that. So I do kind of view him as more of like an off-ball guy. What I wonder though is in all of these reports, because I saw all these, this was Friday, right? That this went down. Nobody mentioned Lonnie Walker in any of these reports. Like, what is Lonnie Walker then? Because he's not big enough to be a 3. I know they're saying Austin Reeves maybe a 3. I think
Lonnie Walker's 6'4", just so everybody knows.
Yeah, and he's not like a big 6'4" either. Like a guy like Gary Payton II is like 6'3", 6'4", but he's kind of big, he's kind of rugged, so you could kind of put him out there and ask him to defend a lot of guys. Walker's he's a little more wiry and those kind of things. And I'm not fully sold that I don't still like him the best kind of upside as a scorer and the things he can do of this entire grouping here. I think what the Lakers have done is they've put themselves in a position where now you get a lot of guys and you're asking Darvin Ham in his very first training camp as the head coach, hey, figure this out, right? So we're sort through it, sort through the guards. Now we're only hearing Kendrick Nunn, the puppies here. We're only hearing Kendrick Nunn is just now starting to like get cleared for contact. And those kind of things. So I think that's a little that's the worst like bruise I think I've ever heard of in my life. There had to be something more going on there. And then, if Westbrook gets traded, Tatum is in the frame. He's saying hello. You gotta go, buddy.
Tatum heard Lakers and his ears perked up. That's some foreshadowing there, Keith.
Something like that. He got angry is what it was. He thought his dad being protected. But yeah, if Russ gets traded, now at least you're dealing from a slight position of strength as far as depth goes, right? Because I look at Nunn and Beverly are more combo guard types, right? Schroeder I see is a more traditional point guard. Not that Beverly and Nunn can't, play that spot as well. So I'm very curious to see how this all plays out. My guess is too, there's a sense of Beverly misses a lot of games every year just with the way he plays. Maybe they are going to start to really ramp down with Russ and play him slightly differently. And then what you may see is we need extra depth in the backcourt because of those things. And then who knows what Nunn's status is as he comes back. But yeah, it's going to be something that Darvin Ham's got to work out now because now you get a lot of guys. And much like we said last year, a bunch of these guys who are playing on 1-year contracts. And that's not always a great place to be because that starts to turn into, all right, these guys are playing on 1-year contracts. And if they start hunting and need minutes and those kind of things, that becomes an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's there's 14 players on the roster right now. Of those, 11 of them are on one-year deals. I mean, technically, Damian Jones is a player option for a second year, but you're talking about LeBron, AD, and Max Christie, and that's it. Everybody else is a 1-year contract. So
It's
That's
so
going to be a
close to my
challenge.
dream, Trevor, of like all contracts expire at the same time for a team. It's like so close, and it's maybe when LeBron and AD's contracts expire at the end of the 24-25 season, we'll get there.
We've never seen that, have we? A team that
No,
that is complete tabula rasa, has a blank slate at the end of a season.
always wanted. It's like my full dream because it's like an expansion team, but full books are clear and
Mhm.
you don't even have like right because you come out of an expansion draft with a couple contracts you don't want and those kind of things,
Right.
and then you still have you're usually in the first couple of years they're operating under a limited salary cap, and it's always been my dream, man. 12 open roster spots, just 12 roster charges, and that's it. But
At some
someday.
point somebody is going to bring Daryl Morey back, and then it's gonna happen.
Yeah, right. And then he's going to sign 12 Rockets.
Yeah, that's gonna happen. I mean, they're gonna bring him into the fold, and he's gonna trade everybody on a team, something like that. Or maybe that's more of a Sam Hinkie thing.
Could be. Could
They'll
be.
bring him in,
Sure.
and he'll do something like that. But
Yeah.
in any event, yes, the Lakers almost to Keith's cap nirvana, but not quite.
I'll
Let's
say
talk.
too, I want to
Yeah,
throw out there, you and Sean did a good job. I actually tuned in a little bit Friday afternoon and watched you guys live, breaking it all down. And I know you, I think you started out saying like, "Hey, we don't really have a lot to talk about. We're going to talk
you
about the
did.
jerseys," and then all of a sudden it's like Schroeder signed, and you did a great job, man, adjusting on the fly, and both of you did a good job reacting to everything, live. Especially that chat was full of, "Where's Russ going? Russ must be
Yep,
gone now. It's done. Announce the Russ trade and all those things." And like, yeah, and then there was like 8 articles that dropped that felt like in the next like 15 minutes about
that was
what does
crazy.
the Schroeder signing mean? And it's like, it's funny because all of them were like, it could mean these 57 things, but
Right.
really it's just a nice depth pickup for the Lakers on the cheap.
Well, peek behind the curtain for Sean and I, that meant essentially in order to like get through some of those articles, which clearly some of them had been written before the Schroeder thing, and then like the Sam
Absolutely. Yeah.
Amick, Jovan Buha,
Yeah.
they were written before and then they came out. But in order to kind of parse through those, it was Sean would be reading. I'd talk for like a minute and I would throw to
Yeah.
him, and then I would go through and read while so we're not quite listening to each other. And then
Yeah.
meanwhile, our chat, which does a fantastic job, they were keeping us up to date on everything.
Yeah.
On hey, this just came out. And so that was fantastic too, because we had all them hunting for
And
news
shout
and
out to
everything.
them too. They weren't throwing out nonsense stuff
No,
either. They were putting actual good like links in there, and well, not links, but like check out Mark Stein, check
yep.
out Sam Amick, check this out. Like versus, I know when we've done a couple live shows, it's like Woj just announced,
People
Larry
make up
Bird and
stuff.
Magic Johnson are coming back to play for the Seattle expansion team.
Right.
It's like, what is this craziness? Yeah. So, but yeah.
Well, the Showtime Lakers did just have a reunion
True.
in Hawaii, and they actually ran a little practice. They didn't look too bad. Lakers have an open roster spot. I'm just
Is
saying.
that how far it's fallen for you?
That's where we're
That's
at
where
right
you're
now. It
at?
can't be any worse than last year. Kareem
Oh
can go out
man,
there and hit a sky hook every now and then. He's only
that's true.
75. It'll be
That's true.
fine.
Yeah. Hey, what was funny though is it just goes to show you, like they all still knew. Like Pat Riley called out a set, and they all went
Hmm.
immediately into it. It was really cool. It was that was a fun, and that's fun too, and good for them for doing it while almost all the guys are still around.
Yeah.
And not waiting till like player X, who was a key guy, passed away and
Right.
stuff. And yeah, a couple of them. I mean, Byron Scott looks like he could probably still put up a few points, at least in a high end pickup game. He looks like he's in pretty good shape.
Yeah, that's for sure. They can still get it done out there. All right, let's talk a little bit about the CBA,
Yeah.
because there's probably going to be a new one, and I think so. Shams had an article today in the Athletic about the new CBA, and before we get into the particulars, I want to say that the thing that struck me and thing that I really appreciated was the vibe that this is going to get done, that these two sides, that
Yeah.
we're not going to see a work stoppage or anything like that, that there's, he mentioned in there that they navigated the NBPA and the NBA, they navigated some very, very difficult times through COVID
Mhm.
that frankly the CBA was not constructed to ever handle, right?
No.
It was not supposed to deal with a pandemic, right? And so they had to work together and negotiate a lot of things on the fly. And because of that, kind of the silver lining to obviously a terrible thing in terms of a pandemic, but it's created this relationship between the NBPA and the NBA that's obviously been doing very well financially. And so that certainly helps as well. But it's created this environment of community, and one where there's this this working relationship that feels like it is going to ultimately lead to a new collective bargaining agreement. We're not going to go back to like a shortened season due to a work stoppage or
Right.
anything like that.
Yeah, and that's why it's very important. If the fact that they're already working, we knew they were working in July. We
Yeah,
heard that they had started high level talks. And I know people think that there are a million issues, right? You see the overreactions to like this Kevin Durant thing, man, this CBA is going to be a battle and all
sure.
that. That is a relatively minor issue on the grand scheme of things. It's just not that big of a thing. Whereas the big things are always money, right? And they're basically saying, hey, we're splitting it, for lack of getting super deep into this, we're basically splitting everything 50-50. And you know what, we're splitting a ton of money 50-50 between ownership and the players. And that's exactly the thing is, I'm very fond of the saying, it's better to have half a watermelon than a whole grape,
Yeah.
right? You just they're splitting up a massive pie here, and everybody's rich. And I think in the article, Tamika Tremaglio, the new head of the NBPA on the players side, she is took over for Michelle Roberts, and one of the things she said is, look, we all have money now. Now it's about how do we create generational wealth? How do we sustain that for the players after? So I think things you're going to see is, we're not going to talk about now because they're not really major subject. They're going to do a lot more for retired players. And we saw both the NBA and the NBPA do kind of joint resolutions to do more for retired players. So that's going to be an important thing. But the major issues are hammered out. Everything
Yeah.
else now is details. Now there's a million details they need to come, and there's going to
Yeah.
be some things that are going to change. We're going to talk about a couple of them here in just a minute. But yeah, when you hear, if this does get to December 15th and there's a mutual opt out and they opt out, it's not like the season's going to stop, because
No.
this season is covered, and it's not like it's going to drag out. Guaranteed they'll be done. Now, guys like CJ McCollum and a couple of the other players, Grant Williams is another guy who's pretty heavily involved, Jaylen Brown from the Celtics, they're going to be busy in the offseason, in season, because they're going to be doing their stuff for their teams. Paul also dealing with CBA stuff, but that's just the nature of it, and that's going to be how it goes. But I wouldn't be surprised if they're really hammering now to try to, hey, before we even get to that opt out, let's have something in agreement and in place. And a big part of it, as you referenced, is they got through that really rough 3 seasons, pandemic impacted, with, I don't want to brush it off and say it was easy or anything like that, because it certainly wasn't, but they got through it, and the league is coming out on the other side in a very, very good, healthy, strong place.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so that is going to help get this next CBA done. Now, there are going to be some things to negotiate. I think the Kevin Durant thing will come up. I think players asking,
Oh, it
like
absolutely
when we
is.
get into, we're going to get into like the luxury tax and all that. I'm sure there's going to be give and take in a lot of areas. It's not like December 15th, they opt out, December 16th, here's the new deal. No, it's going to take some time to negotiate, but the general sense is it's going to happen. It's not a general sense of, ooh, let's see if they can figure
Yeah.
this out because this is going to be a mess. It's not like that. But the first topic we want to get into, the NBA age limit, it's going to be decreasing again, going back down to 18. It had bumped up to 19. So this now means that we can see players coming straight to the NBA out of high school. Interesting to me. I always thought that when this came through, it would ultimately turn into instead of just a one and done, that going away, it would then be 2 or none, which means if you go to college, you have to stay for 2 years. If you don't, then you can go straight to the NBA. It doesn't sound like the 2 or none part of it is in there currently. It sounds like it's just when you're 18, you can jump to the NBA if you want.
Yeah, the NBA has no business in sustaining college basketball,
Right. Yeah.
or no interest, I should say. Now you can argue maybe they should be a little bit more concerned, but they're not. They don't care. They would rather have 5 or 6 versions of the G League Ignite,
Yeah.
where kids are basically, they come right in as pros, start training with pros, and they go right into the G League and do their stuff there, than anybody ever sets foot on a college campus. It's, there's a reason why these coaches are, even, everybody points to, and God, it was 20 years ago now almost, Jermaine O'Neal, right? He went and sat the bench for the Trailblazers for years, and then moved to the Pacers, and when he finally got his chance, he showed he could play. Well, part of it was he sat the bench because he was developing, and that's what the Trailblazers were doing with him, was working with him. They'd rather that than him spending a year or two at Duke and working on his game there. So yeah, that part doesn't surprise me as much. I thought you might see the NCAA push, and maybe they will. Maybe the
It might.
NCAA will say, hey, if you come here, like you're committing to be here for whatever, or you lose full eligibility or whatever. Now, I think it'd be in their benefit to be a little bit more flexible and say like, hey, if you want to explore, which they've done, right? They've kind of tweaked in the last couple of years. You want to explore the draft process and then come back and withdraw and come back to school. Great, we're going to own that. That's just smart on the NCAA side, because I think they're realizing this is almost a game of survival for them, because you'll just start losing these kids. But here's the kind of one of the big drawbacks to this, though, is every kid you allow into the league at 18, teams are going to jump on them because they're going to say, here's a 7-foot kid at 18 with a ton of potential. We'll snag him. We'll let him develop for a couple years. We'll figure out where it is then. Then we'll, we can match deals. We can do whatever we got to do contract wise. We're going to have this kid, for basically the, into his mid to late 20s. Every kid that they pick like that, that's one more veteran who's going to be out of a job, because they're probably not going to drastically increase the roster sizes. I can't imagine that comes. It doesn't sound like expansion is super far off, but it's also not tomorrow. It's probably not coming as this new CBA kicks in. So that is something to factor in. It's part of the whole deal, but the NBA wants players to be able to make that decision and say, we want to come. And more importantly, from their side, they want to be able to start working with these kids as soon as possible.
We're talking 2024 probably is when this new CBA would be coming about.
Yeah.
I also want to say though that if you do this, you are just naturally going to create more draft misses as well. There's going to be more players that are simply missed upon in the draft, where you burn a pick and that player does not pan out because you just have 1 year less of information on that player. So, well, there's the people who jump straight to the NBA. Your Kobe, your KG, your LeBron, all those guys, and those guys obviously can do it no problem.
Yep.
And it works out great, and you get superstars and all of that. But there's also players who jump to the NBA and wound up missing. And because you get 1 year less to evaluate that player, whereas had that player been in college for another year, maybe you would have figured out, hey, this guy isn't quite ready. He needs to stay 2 years in college and then make that jump to the NBA. You are going to see more draft picks missed upon by teams once this goes into effect, I think. And I think that's not necessarily saying they shouldn't do this. I think that can be an acceptable trade-off, especially as the G League comes into play. And I want to ask you about this, Keith. I think what's really important, if you're going to do this and you're going to make this work the right way, I think, and I believe this is something they will do, they have to have some very strong safety nets in place to really support these players coming over. It's hard enough for a 19-year-old, for an 18-year-old. We've heard some of the horror stories. Of course, you go back and look at some of the things that Kwame Brown went through, jumping straight to the NBA. You have to have support systems in place for these young players if you want to give them the highest possibility chance to succeed.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think what we are going to see with this is we are going to get a handful of newly created jobs. And I don't know what to call this job, but it's basically going to be almost like a caretaker type, where what that person will do is they're really going to make sure, right? Because you're going to hand an 18-year-old, and they don't get all $1 million right away, but you're going to hand them thousands upon thousands of dollars. And the other thing, a crap ton of free time, because they're basically going to go to practice for a few hours, do their workout, do their lifting, do their stuff. That's probably about 6 hours a day total on a non-game day. And then they're going to be home with 18 hours to kill. And yeah, certainly a bunch of them will plop down and play video games and do their thing. But a lot of them are going to have thousands of dollars for a lot of guys. And I'm not even making this a thing about poor inner city kids and stuff. A lot of these kids, even the middle class
18-year-old in general,
18-year-olds don't have thousands of dollars generally just hanging out to do whatever they want with. So that's something where you just need somebody. And I think what would be great is this is a great spot for some former players to get jobs with teams where they're kind of the ones there saying, hey, let me help you out. Let me talk to you about, hey, this is what you really should be doing with your time. We want to avoid this, we want to avoid that, and do those kind of things. Because we hear that even after 1 year of college, these guys come in. Because remember, they're not, I get it, right? Everybody's going to laugh and be like, yeah, like these guys go to class. A lot of them do still go to class, even in their 1 year in college, the one and dones, but their time is very regimented and scheduled because of the way the college works. In the NBA, it's going to be, hey, you're at practice on time. You did all your other work. Great. See you later. We'll see you tomorrow. Like, we'll get back at it tomorrow at 8 a.m. or whatever. And then you're left to your own devices. Where in college, there's going to be 15 people checking in on you. So that's my first thing. I think we're going to see that. Teams are going to have to add scouts because they're going to have to be in high school gyms again. Mm-hmm. So instead of watching Duke, Kentucky play, and there's 10 first-round prospects between the two teams, you're going to have to go out and find these kids, in the gyms and those kind of things. And yes, there's going to be high-profile events and the like where those, teams will meet each other. I know just down the road from me here in the Orlando area is Montverde Academy, which is basically a pro style, high level college style, the way they run their high school program. But even they still play, East West, high school, Florida, and and then they beat them by 90 points, and it's like, all right, what do we get out of this? So that's just something else to keep in mind too. There's going to be guys in the gym, and then G League teams need to be ready to receive these kids because you're going to see a lot of these kids on the NBA roster and then moved. I think a good compromise would be, as long as you're going to pay everybody appropriately, something where these kids have to log some G League time if they come in straight from high school.
Sure.
Maybe it's, hey, you came straight out of high school, so you get a 6-year contract, and maybe year 1 and year 2 look exactly the same contractually. And in year 1, you are, you're in the G League. That's just your adjustment, your step into the world of professional basketball. Last thing I will say on this is there's no reason why every single NBA ownership group couldn't commit to, you come into the NBA, and I don't care if it's you come in straight out of high school, you come in after 1 year of college, whatever the case may be, we will pay for you to go get your college degree at a time of your choosing. So if a kid gets in, only lasts 2-3 years in the league, can't cut it, doesn't make it, he's can't even cut it overseas, he's out of basketball by the time he's 25, you're taken care of. You can pick a school, we got you covered, go get your education, your degree, and we'll help you along from there for the rest of the way.
I like that idea. That would be a very strong way to support these players, especially the players who don't quite make it into professional basketball long term. Yep. Another thing that popped up: mental health designation being treated just like a physical injury. The players will be able to get extra support for mental health, that they'll be able to designate that as a reason for them not being able to practice, not being able to potentially play. Obviously, Ben Simmons comes to mind when we think about this type of situation. But I think this is an important step for the league, though I could see where some fans will not receive this well, because there's some that still see Ben Simmons as maybe abusing this situation in order to help further his trade request. But I think overall, if we set that aside, this is a very positive step for the league, and I believe the first of its kind for the major sports leagues.
Yeah, I think so too. And yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to make mental health issues simple at all, because they're not. No. But as far as game day operations go, this is as simple as player X is out with a sprained ankle, injury, did not play. Player Y is out with mental health, did not play. Whatever designation they want to call it, whatever they want to, agreed upon, call it. I don't see any reason why, we can't have that, right? I think, right, I can't tell you how many times when I worked my office job, I was like, I just need a day. Like, right now, I would always say I need a mental health day. I need a day to take a break, to sit. I don't know why, maybe an NBA player, can't have one of those too. I think there's a major misconception that NBA players get true off days. Off days from games are not off days. They're rarely something where it is truly off. And if it is, it's usually like, we're just coming back from a West Coast trip. We get in on a Sunday night, no game Monday. Monday's a true off day. You do whatever you want to do. but most of the time it is you got to go get treatment. There's probably a film session. There might be a walkthrough. There might be, X, Y, and Z. There's rarely true off days. There's, maybe somewhere around 10 in a total, season that are built in that are actually true off days outside of the All-Star break. Period. So that's just something to factor in as well, right? They go really hard from end of September, and if you're lucky enough, all the way till the end of June. That's a pretty long period. That's basically 9 months. You're going really super hard the whole way through with very little downtime.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a challenge certainly for all players, especially when we talk about some of the younger players coming in as well. So this, I think, is an important step. Will be interesting to see how other sports leagues respond to this.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But in general, I think that the NBA has sort of led the charge to destigmatize the idea of mental health, the concept. We've seen players, DeMar DeRozan, Kevin Love, among others, who have championed this cause. And so I think this is a solid step forward for the NBA. Again, we'll see exactly how this is implemented, but like you said, it shouldn't be that difficult to just change a designation on essentially an injury report.
It's better than saying he's out with a sore back, or
Sure.
just be
Yeah. Like
honest
making
about it,
something
right?
up. Right.
Yeah, like just be, and this is all made possible by players come out and being completely upfront and honest
Mhm.
that they, have had these struggles in the past. Because if they're upfront and honest, then there's nothing to hide from. This is not something you should be ashamed of. We all go through tough times, and sometimes what you need is a little break and a little bit of help. And if this is what puts it there for those guys to get it, I'm all for it.
Yeah. Yep. All right. We also see potentially changes to the luxury tax. Teams are looking to make it a bit more punishing to go into that tax. Um, and that's something I know from the fan perspective. You think, well, why would teams want that? Why would teams want to have to pay more? Teams want to try. Teams are trying to save themselves from themselves.
Yep.
That's
And
what you
level the
see.
playing field.
Yes, right. And so it's trying to prevent from having to pay too much or add or have that pressure to add to your roster. And in addition, you can also level that playing field. If there's a sense, like you look at the luxury tax payments this year for the Clippers, for the Warriors, for some of these other teams, there was that kind of rumbling after this last season that the Warriors spent their way to a championship. Now, I don't buy that, but just NBA owners in general looking at it saying, well, the highest paying team and luxury tax, they won the championship because, of course, because they paid more. We don't want a system where you can essentially buy a championship. So that's kind of the argument here about making the luxury tax more punitive. Now, players, they don't want this because that
Right.
means ownership is less willing to spend, less willing to give contracts, less willing to give longer term deals, and on and on and on. So it's an interesting battle here as far as the luxury tax goes. It wouldn't surprise me if it does get a little bit more strict, but this will be an area where there's going to be some give and take, I think, some compromise between the NBPA and the NBA.
I think this one opens the door for maybe you do things like, all right, we're going to have a stricter luxury tax. But in terms of actual cap hits, a guy like Stephen Curry, right, who makes 50 plus million, almost 60 million a year, he only counts at X because he's re-signed by his original team or
Uh-huh.
something like that. And that's a way you still allow the players to get paid, still allow the team to keep those players, but you're not going into these. I mean, the Warriors realistically could, if they re-sign some of their key guys in the next year or so, they could be looking at a $400 to $500 luxury tax, bill. That's on top of the, what will nearly be $200 million in salary. So you're
Four to
talking
five
over.
hundred million dollar, right?
Yeah, is that what did I say?
You said $400 to $500.
Yeah, I'm out of it. Yes, $1 million. Yeah, $1 million.
They would
Yeah,
not mind that at all. Four
yeah,
to five hundred
they,
dollars. They'd
yeah,
be
yeah.
happy
They
to
pay
pay that.
that. Yeah, that's they drop that out of their pocket on the way into the locker room. Yeah, no, $400 to $500 million on top of at that point would be basically a $200 salary payroll. So you're talking over $500 million, in tax plus salaries. Like that's, that's crazy. And so I think this will be, yeah, let's make it a little bit more punitive, but then we'll have some other measures potentially in place to still allow for players to get paid, because you're absolutely right. What you do is, even if you say it's not a hard cap, you're still kind of putting a hard cap on teams, because you're still going to have teams who are like, yeah, I'm not going past the $180 million amount or whatever it is, because I don't want to pay these ridiculous tax penalties. Then the players are going to look at it and be like, well, now I'm out of a job because we're going to see a bunch of teams carry an open roster spot into the regular season,
Yep.
strictly out of luxury tax payment concerns, and knowing, yeah, we'll fill it probably around the trade deadline or a little bit after that during buyout season, but they're going to go months and months, and that's months and months of a lost job in the NBA. So that's something where players have a right to really be concerned.
Ultimately, big picture, when we pan back, players are guaranteed their percentage of basketball related income, regardless of what teams spend or don't spend. So
Yeah.
how does all of that kind of come into play here with this in terms of changing the luxury tax? I mean, obviously teams don't want to have to spend too much, but teams are going to have, like, according to the CBA, they have to spend a certain amount.
The tax, and forgive me, I'm a little bit of a cold medicine fog here.
No
I'll
problem.
look it up and come back to you. But the tax money is that's not part of the basketball.
It's not part of BRI. I know that would go into
so
a separate
that's where
fund.
it is, right? Because that's where the play. So I mean, the players are still going to get their 50% of BRI no matter what.
Right.
Yeah. So that's still going to go to them, and quite frankly, they generally end up getting. I don't want to say more, but they get plenty, because there's a whole. If we remember back to the pandemic season, there's a whole, we're going to put more in escrow, and they hold stuff in escrow, and then players either get cut a check, or that money gets basically redistributed amongst the owners and those kind of things. So yeah, they're still going to get paid. They just don't want jobs lost because of it, right? Because that's really what this comes down to. Instead of
it's the jobs.
Yeah, right. And that was one of the whole issues with the two-way contracts, was teams started, well, we've got these two guys on two-way contracts, let's just use those instead of filling roster spots 14 and 15 for as long as we had to. And that became like kind of an issue for a while, and that seemed to work itself out. So hopefully this doesn't go there. But yeah, I think we're going to see some downstream changes because of this. If they get more punitive here, I think we'll see some other changes that'll be really interesting to track as well.
All right, we've got one more topic. We went longer than I even planned to today, which is par for the course for us. But let's knock this one out and then get you back to doing some resting there, and hopefully recovering from that cold. Kendall Brown, David Duke Jr. get two-way contracts with the Pacers and the Nets, respectively. We've most of the smaller signings, the Exhibit 10 deals and stuff, we haven't covered those because, frankly, we don't really need to. But these are two-way contracts that could potentially matter.
Yeah, absolutely. On those Exhibit 10s, we spent a lot of time talking about that in our last show, where we really went in depth on why some of the
what
guys
it is. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Why some of these guys you're seeing get signed and then waived almost immediately and the like. But with Kendall Brown, he was drafted by the Pacers with the assumption that he'd be on a two-way. So that is going to happen. And then David Duke Jr. was on a two-way with the Nets, and he flashed at times and looked pretty good. There was a thought of maybe he would get a standard contract by the end of the season. They didn't end up having to do that. They kind of kept him around, and then they kept his restricted rights. So now he'll be back on a two-way. He's somebody, actually both of these guys, I think there's a good chance they play themselves off those before this season is over. And we're seeing more teams be more and more open to that idea. If the guy's good enough, get him off the two-way, get him on the regular roster, and let's go. Let's get him signed and move along. And we know the Pacers, they're sitting on $30 million in cap space, so they're certainly going to be in a position where they could probably do something like that. And for the Nets and Duke, it's probably something as simple as give them part of their remaining exception, or get them onto a minimum deal for a couple years, like they did with Kessler Edwards a year ago.
Right. All right. I think that wraps things up. We'll get Keith out of here so he can go rest up and hopefully
go back to bed
from this cold. Yeah, back to bed. But everybody, appreciate you for joining us. Make sure you do subscribe to the NBA Front Office Show over on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Please make sure you do follow us as the season starts up. We're so excited. Going to be so much to talk about in the world of the NBA. Till next time, everybody. See ya and stay safe.